The galaxy was a vast and organized empire of stars, with power and order controlled by the Galactic Empire. This empire ruled over hundreds of worlds, species, and systems for centuries, bringing peace, or at least the illusion of it, to the galaxy's inhabitants. They had built fleets of the most advanced warships ever created, ensuring their dominance in space. No one had ever dared to challenge the empire in its core territories. But today, something unexpected happened. A human warship, small and old, compared to the Empire's grand fleet, appeared out of nowhere. The ship, called the Vanguard, entered the Empire's border without warning. It moved silently through the darkness of space, unnoticed by most, as though it was just another forgotten piece of debris. But the Empire's high command could sense it, and they were not pleased. General Jaster stood in the heart of the Empire's command center, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. On it was the image of the Vanguard, an old, unremarkable ship from a world called Earth. It shouldn't have been here. No human ship had ever dared to enter Imperial space in over 100 years. And yet, there it was, approaching with no message, no warning, and no explanation. "How did they get past our defenses?" Jaster muttered under his breath. His fingers hovered over the control panel and he tried to process what he was seeing. This was not a normal event. This was a challenge to everything the Empire stood for. The Vanguard was too close to the core of the Empire's power. Too close to the capital. Lieutenant Orla, the young officer at Jastor's side, spoke with urgency. "Sir, we've tried contacting them, but there's no response. The Vanguard is completely silent. It doesn't even appear to be using standard Imperial communication channels." She paused, unsure. "Sir, it's as if they've been prepared for this." Jaster's eyes narrowed. He couldn't deny the truth. The Vanguard had evaded detection for too long. The Empire had a network of sensors spread throughout this part of space, and no ship could simply slip through unnoticed. And yet, the humans had done it. They had somehow managed to infiltrate the Empire's borders without triggering any alarms. The more Jaster thought about it, the more it made his stomach churn. If the humans had the ability to bypass Imperial security, it meant one thing: they had advanced far beyond their reputation. The Empire had once believed that Earth was a backwater planet, a place filled with simple minds and weak technology. But now this warship was telling a different story. "What do we do?" Orla asked, her voice trembling slightly. She had never dealt with something like this before. Neither had anyone in the Empire. Jaster exhaled sharply. "We wait, and we prepare for whatever comes next." His eyes flicked to the large star map on the wall, showing the layout of the Empire's territories. The Vanguard was deep within their space now. They couldn't ignore it. They had to respond, but with caution. This was not the same as dealing with other galactic races. This was humanity. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard, Captain Elias Reynolds stood calmly at the helm. The crew was at attention, watching their screens with a quiet sense of purpose. They had crossed into Imperial space, and there was no going back now. Reynolds had expected to be nervous, but strangely, he felt calm. This was a moment humanity had been waiting for. For decades, Earth had been nothing more than a small, unimportant planet, overshadowed by the larger and more powerful civilizations in the galaxy. But Earth had its strengths no one had seen coming. "Report," Captain Reynolds said, his voice steady. He had spent years planning for this mission, and now that the time had come, he wasn't about to let it slip away. His first officer, Lieutenant Riva, looked up from her console. "Captain, we've been scanning for Imperial ships in the vicinity. We're not detecting anything major. However, the Empire's sensors might have already picked up our signature. We're not invisible." Reynolds nodded. "Understood. We've made our mark. Now, we wait for their move." He knew the Empire would respond soon. They had to. No one entered Imperial space without facing their wrath. But what the Empire didn't realize was that they had underestimated humanity. The Vanguard wasn't just any warship. It was equipped with technology that had been carefully developed by Earth's best minds, a ship designed for this very purpose: to challenge the Empire and show that humanity could stand on equal ground with the most powerful forces in the galaxy. We're ready, Reynolds said quietly. But they don't know we're ready. Keep the communication channels open. If they try to contact us, we'll respond. At that moment, the comm system crackled to life. A message came through, clear and commanding. It was the first response. From the Empire. This is the Imperial fleet. You have entered Imperial space without authorization. Identify yourself immediately, or face immediate consequences. Reynolds smiled faintly. The Empire was predictable. It had always been about power, about intimidation. But humanity wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. He took a deep breath and gave the order. Send them a message. Tell them we're here to talk. And make it clear, we don't intend to back down. As the message was transmitted, the crew of the Vanguard stood ready. They had just ignited a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The Empire could either accept humanity's presence in their space, or they could fight. Either way, humanity would no longer be ignored. Outside the Vanguard, the stars continued to shine quietly, oblivious to the great storm brewing just ahead. The message from the human warship Vanguard echoed through the Imperial Command Center. This is Captain Elias Reynolds of the Earthship Vanguard. We are not here for war, but we will defend ourselves if forced. We request peaceful communication. General. Jaster read the message again and again, his eyes cold and thoughtful. In all his years in service, he had never heard a human voice coming from a ship that far into Empire territory. He turned to his officers. They are testing us. They want to see how we respond. If we attack them first, they will claim we are aggressors. Lieutenant Orla nodded but stayed quiet. She knew the general was angry but careful. The humans were not strong in numbers, but if this ship had technology that could sneak past Imperial sensors, it meant Earth had grown in silence, hidden from the galaxy's eyes. Send a response, Jaster ordered at last. Not a threat, not a welcome, just a test. The message they sent back was short and clear. Your presence is unauthorized. Remain where you are. Do not advance further. Any sudden move will be treated as hostile. Across the stars, on the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Reynolds received the reply. He read it slowly, then looked at his crew. They're nervous, he said quietly. They don't want to start a war either. Lieutenant Riva asked, Captain, what's the next step? Reynolds looked at the stars ahead. Now, we wait. They're watching us. Let them watch. We came here for a reason, and they need to hear it. He walked to the center console and pressed a few buttons. The ship released a small signal beacon. It drifted slowly toward the Imperial fleet. No weapons. No tricks. Just a simple message inside. A message of peace and truth. It contained recordings of Earth's history, its struggles, its achievements, and a simple request. Let us speak. Let us share. Let us be part of the galaxy. Back on the Imperial Command Station, the beacon was captured and pulled in for scanning. Technicians rushed to examine it for traps or hidden codes, but it was clean. Just a message. General Jaster watched the recording silently. He saw humans walking on strange blue landscapes. He saw machines flying through the skies of Earth. He saw images of Earth leaders speaking of peace, freedom, and unity. Then the message ended with a single sentence spoken in calm and steady voice. We have come not to beg, not to conquer, but to stand beside the stars. Will you speak to us? There was silence in the room. It's a trick, one officer said. They're trying to manipulate us, another whispered. But Jaster said nothing. His mind was racing. Something about the message felt honest, and that scared him more than lies. Elsewhere, deep in space, more Imperial warships were moving. Orders had been given quietly. Surround the human ship. Don't attack yet. Just be ready. Admiral Trex, commander of the 7th Imperial Fleet, didn't trust the Vanguard. He had seen humans fight before long ago. They were clever, stubborn, and dangerous. He opened a private channel to General Jaster. Sir, I have 5 cruisers near the human vessel. 1 word from you, and we can disable them before they react. But Jaster replied, No. Do not fire unless fired upon. I want to understand them first. Understand? Admiral Trex growled. They're a threat. Letting them speak is a mistake. Perhaps, Jaster said. But starting a war we don't understand is a bigger one. Aboard the Vanguard, tension was rising. Captain, Riva said, pointing to her screen. They're moving ships around us. 5 large ones, Imperial class. They've got us surrounded. The crew turned silent. Any sign they're charging weapons? Reynolds asked calmly. Not yet, but their engines are powered and shields are up. Reynolds stood still for a moment. Good. Let them show us their strength, but don't give them a reason to use it. He sent another message. We see your fleet. We are not afraid. We will not attack. But if you fire, we will answer. Lieutenant Riva whispered, Captain, what if they attack first? Then we show them what Earth has become, Reynolds said. His voice was calm, but every crew member felt the weight in his words. The Vanguard wasn't just an old ship. It had secrets, hidden weapons, experimental defenses, and a crew ready to use every one of them. But Reynolds didn't want war. He wanted to make the Empire listen. Hours passed. No shots were fired. Then finally, a message came from the Empire. Not a warning, not a threat, but a request. General Jaster requests a live conversation. Stand by for secure channel. Captain Reynolds looked at the screen. He gave a small smile. They're listening. He nodded to Riva. Open the channel. The screen lit up. For the first time in over a century, a human and a high-ranking Imperial officer looked each other in the eye. General Jaster spoke first. Captain Reynolds, you are brave or foolish. This line is no place for a human ship. Reynolds replied, Then maybe it's time to redraw the lines. There was a pause. Then the general said, Talk. You have 5 minutes. Impress me. The screen flickered as the connection held firm. 2 sides. 1 conversation. A galaxy holding its breath. The screen flickered again, and General Jaster's face filled the view on the Vanguard's communication panel. His expression was cold, yet there was something in his eyes that spoke of curiosity. Captain Reynolds didn't flinch. He had been waiting for this moment, for the first real chance to speak to someone from the Empire. General, Reynolds said, his voice steady. You asked to speak. Here I am. Jaster's lips tightened as he regarded the human. The silence between them stretched for a moment, heavy with the weight of history of thousands of years of empire building and conquest. Yet for all that, Jaster could not ignore the truth that was staring him in the face. This human ship, this Vanguard, had done something no one had expected. You're here, Jaster began, at the edge of Imperial space. Why? The question hung in the air. It wasn't a threat, just an inquiry. The general was not used to feeling uncertain, but this was no ordinary situation. Reynolds met his gaze unflinching. We're here because we were tired of being ignored. For too long, Earth was a footnote in galactic history. We've earned the right to be heard. This ship is proof of that. Jaster's eyebrows rose. You think one ship will change the fate of your entire species? He shook his head slowly. You're brave, but you are out of your depth. I don't expect one ship to change everything, Reynolds replied, but it's a start, and we'll keep pushing forward 1 step at a time. Jaster leaned forward, his voice lowering. You should know, Earth is not ready for what the galaxy can throw at it. The Empire's strength is unmatched. You are not prepared for what is to come if you keep pushing. Reynolds' lips curled into a small smile. I wouldn't be here if I thought we weren't prepared. The general's eyes narrowed as though searching for a crack in the human's confidence. The Empire is a force of nature. You cannot simply step into its borders and expect things to go your way. We're not here to go our way, General. We're here because the galaxy is bigger than just your empire. It's time for humans to stand alongside the stars. Jaster sat back in his chair. His fingers drummed softly against the armrest as he considered the words. It was clear that the human before him was not intimidated. Perhaps they had finally reached a point where humans no longer saw themselves as lesser beings. For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Then Jaster spoke again, this time more thoughtfully. You speak of standing alongside the stars, Captain Reynolds. Tell me, what do you believe you can offer the galaxy? What makes your people worthy of being part of something greater? Reynolds looked at him, and in that moment he saw more than a general. He saw a man trying to understand a force he could not control. We offer something simple, General. Hope. Humanity has known what it's like to be oppressed. We've fought to survive. We've built ourselves from nothing. If we can do that, then we can offer the galaxy something no one else can. Resilience. Jaster's expression softened just for a moment. He had heard stories of humanity's past, of wars and suffering. The rise of Earth from a small divided world into a thriving united species had not gone unnoticed by the galaxy. But stories of the past were just that, stories. What truly mattered was the present. I've seen many species come and go, Captain, Jaster said slowly, and I've watched empires rise and fall. If your species wants to stand beside the stars, you will need more than just your words. You will need strength, and you will need allies. Reynolds leaned forward, his eyes intense. We have allies, General. We just haven't met them yet. The statement caught Jaster off guard. Allies. Earth has no allies. The galaxy has always viewed you as insignificant. That's the past, Reynolds replied, voice calm. We're no longer insignificant. We're no longer isolated. We've built ships like the Vanguard, ships that can change the balance of power. Jaster considered this carefully. The idea that Earth could have hidden allies, hidden power, was unsettling. The Empire was not accustomed to having its authority questioned, and yet, he could not deny the persistence in Reynolds's voice. The human before him truly believed in the strength of his people. I don't believe you understand the magnitude of the situation, Jaster said. You cannot just waltz into our space and demand to be heard. We don't negotiate with those who threaten our dominance. Then what happens next, General? Reynolds asked, his tone cool. You wipe us out? Jaster's eyes hardened. I don't believe you fully understand the consequences of your actions, but I'm willing to listen. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Listen? After everything you've seen, you're willing to listen? Jaster paused. Yes, because despite your boldness, there is something in your words I cannot ignore. The Vanguard is a symbol, isn't it? A symbol of what humanity can become. But symbols alone do not win wars. Action does. Reynolds nodded slowly. Action indeed. We came here not just for a seat at the table. We came to prove that humanity has a place in this galaxy, and we will fight for it if we must. The general stared at him, weighing his words. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, Jaster spoke again, his voice quieter but firm. Very well, Captain. I will grant you your request. We will meet with your diplomats, on neutral ground. Reynolds' expression softened, though the determination never left his eyes. Thank you, General. You won't regret it. The connection flickered for a moment. Then the screen went dark. The conversation was over. The crew of the Vanguard let out a collective breath, though no one spoke. They had made their first step into the galaxy's heart, and though it was small, it was a step toward something much bigger. As General Jaster sat back in his chair, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict, and humanity, small, insignificant Earth, had just made its first move. The Vanguard floated silently in space, surrounded by Imperial warships. The vast emptiness of the galaxy stretched out before it, but all of the crew knew that this moment was anything but empty. The next few hours could change the course of history, or lead to the destruction of everything they had worked for. Captain Reynolds stood in the center of the bridge, his face calm but his mind racing. The message from General Jaster had been clear. A meeting would take place, but it would not be in Imperial space. They would meet on neutral ground, somewhere on the edge of the Empire's control. "We have a chance," Reynolds said quietly, to his first officer, Lieutenant Riva. "But we have to be careful. The Empire doesn't give second chances." Riva nodded, her face tense with worry. "If they're playing us, Captain, we need to be ready to fight." Reynolds met her eyes, and then turned his gaze to the view screen. The stars were distant and cold, but the Empire was right here, watching their every move. The Vanguard was not a warship in the traditional sense. It was a symbol of humanity's strength, but symbols alone couldn't stop the Imperial fleet. "Have you made contact?" "With the neutral zone?" Reynolds asked. Riva tapped at her console. "Yes, Captain, the neutral zone is clear. No Imperial ships in sight." "Good," Reynolds replied. "Prepare for departure. We're leaving now." The crew moved swiftly to their stations, each member focused on their task. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the Vanguard slowly turned, its course set for the designated meeting place. Meanwhile, on the Imperial command ship Reckoning, General Jaster stood at the center of a darkened room. His officers watched him quietly, their eyes filled with uncertainty. "Sir, they're moving," one of the officers said, breaking the silence. "The Vanguard is heading for the neutral zone." Jaster didn't respond immediately. He had been thinking about the conversation with Captain Reynolds. The human was stubborn, but there was something else. Something that had stuck with him. Humanity had faced hardships that few species could understand, and that kind of experience bred resilience. That was what worried him the most. "Do we proceed as planned?" Admiral Trex asked, his voice filled with skepticism. Jaster turned slowly, his face unreadable. "We wait. We meet them on neutral ground as agreed." Admiral Trex frowned. "And if this is a trap?" "It's not a trap," Jaster replied firmly. "But we will be ready for anything. Prepare the fleet. Make sure we have every advantage." Despite the general's calm demeanor, there was a nervous energy that hung in the air. This meeting could lead to a breakthrough, or it could be the beginning of a war. The stakes were too high to predict. The Vanguard reached the neutral zone without incident. The stars around them were dim, and the space felt empty, a perfect place for a meeting where no one could hide. Reynolds stood before the view screen, watching as the Imperial ships slowly emerged from the shadows. They were massive, intimidating, and brimming with power. The Vanguard was small in comparison, but it was not defenseless. "We'll make it through this," Reynolds muttered to himself. "We have to." Lieutenant Riva stepped up beside him, her eyes scanning the incoming fleet. "Captain, the Imperial ships are in position. We're not alone." Reynolds nodded. "I know, stay sharp. I'm not trusting anyone until this is over." The communications officer spoke up. "Sir, General Jaster's fleet has opened a channel. They're ready to begin." "Put it through," Reynolds ordered. The screen flickered to life, and General Jaster's face appeared once again, his expression neutral but his eyes hard. "Captain Reynolds," he said, his voice calm, "it's time to talk." Reynolds gave a small nod. "I'm listening, General." Jaster took a moment before responding. "I'm not foolish enough to believe that your people have come here. Just to talk. You have a purpose, Captain. But let's be clear about one thing. There is no room for failure. If you seek to join the galactic community, then you must prove that you are worthy of that place." "I don't need your permission," Reynolds replied, his voice firm. "But we are here to offer a partnership. We can be allies. You don't have to fear us. But if you force us to fight, we will defend ourselves." Jaster's gaze narrowed. "And what makes you think you can match the power of the Empire?" Reynolds met his stare with equal intensity. "We've already beaten the odds just by getting this far. That's what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and we win." A silence fell over the conversation. General Jaster took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly. "We're not here to make threats, Captain," he said after a pause. "We're here to evaluate you. If you truly want to be part of this galaxy, then you must prove that you can be trusted. That means showing us what you can bring to the table, not with words, with actions. Reynolds didn't hesitate. We've already shown you who we are, but if you want actions, we'll give them to you. We're not backing down, General. We won't be treated like lesser beings. Jaster studied him for a long moment before replying. Very well. Let's see if your actions match your words. The screen flickered again and the communication cut off. The tension in the room was thick enough to be felt, but there was no turning back now. Reynolds turned to his crew. Get ready, if we need to. Prove ourselves, we'll do it. But let's make sure we don't have to. Prepare for whatever comes next. Back on the Reckoning, Jaster turned to Admiral Trex and his staff. Deploy the fleet. Prepare for potential engagement, but do not fire unless necessary. We're testing them. This is the final step. Admiral Trex nodded, but there was a look of doubt in his eyes. General, you're giving them too much credit. They're just humans. Jaster looked out at the stars. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. The two fleets sat in the neutral zone, the distance between them charged with a quiet tension. The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, would be decided by the actions of two very different forces. Neither side knew what would happen next, but both were ready for whatever came. The calm of the neutral zone was broken only by the hum of the Vanguard's engines. A low, steady pulse filled the ship, but on the bridge, tension was thick. Captain Reynolds stood at the front, eyes fixed on the view screen, watching the massive Imperial fleet surrounding them. He knew what was coming next, and it wasn't going to be easy. We've crossed the line, Reynolds murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Now it's up to us to prove we deserve to stand here. Lieutenant Riva, her eyes scanning the sensors, spoke up. Captain, the Imperial fleet is powering up their weapons. They're ready. Reynolds' face remained calm, though his mind was sharp. No surprises, we're not here to fight unless we have no other choice, but make no mistake, we will not back down. Riva nodded, but there was a trace of uncertainty in her eyes. Understood, sir. The Vanguard was smaller and older than the Imperial ships, but Reynolds had always believed that the strength of a ship wasn't just in its weapons. It was in the heart of its crew. It was in the belief that they could stand up against the odds no matter how high they were. Captain, the communications officer said, interrupting his thoughts, we've received a signal from the Imperial flagship. They're requesting we send a representative for the next phase of the meeting. Reynolds glanced at the crew. I'll go. Prepare the ship for any sudden movements. Keep our shields ready. The crew didn't hesitate. They all knew what was at stake. Moments later, Captain Reynolds was in the small shuttle that would take him to the heart of the Imperial fleet. The shuttle was simple, unarmed, and meant only for transport. As it moved away from the Vanguard, Reynolds felt the weight of the moment. He was about to step into the lion's den. But he was a human, and humans didn't back down. The shuttle glided smoothly through space toward the Reckoning, the flagship of the Imperial fleet. It loomed in front of him, a massive structure that seemed to swallow up the stars. Reynolds couldn't help but feel small, but then he reminded himself, size didn't matter. Strength did. Inside the Reckoning, the atmosphere was cold and impersonal. Jaster was waiting for him in the central meeting room. His officers were nearby, but it was clear that the general wanted to speak directly with Reynolds. Captain Reynolds, Jaster greeted him as he entered. His voice was formal, but there was a hint of respect in his tone. You've come. I wasn't sure you would. Reynolds stood tall. I keep my word, General. Jaster motioned for him to sit. I hope you understand the gravity of this meeting. The Empire does not give its trust easily. This is your chance to show us that your species is more than just a passing curiosity. Reynolds sat across from Jaster, his posture firm. We're not a curiosity, General. We've been around for a long time. We've fought through wars, famine, and disease. We've rebuilt ourselves from nothing. We've learned what it means to survive, to adapt, to grow stronger. Jaster raised an eyebrow. And you think that's enough to prove you're worthy of being part of the galaxy? Strength alone is not enough. The Empire has faced countless challenges over the centuries. We've conquered enemies who were just as determined as you are. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? Reynolds leaned forward slightly. Because we're not like other species. Humans don't just fight for power. We fight for survival. We fight for freedom. We fight to protect what we love. And we never give up, no matter how impossible the odds seem. Jaster studied him for a long time, his eyes narrowing. You make bold claims, Captain. But this galaxy is a dangerous place. Your people may have fought to survive, but survival in this galaxy requires more than just willpower. It requires unity, strategy, and strength. You will have to prove that you can adapt to the way things work here. Reynolds met his gaze with unwavering confidence. Then I will prove it, General. Starting today. A silence fell between them, and Jaster seemed to weigh his words carefully. Finally, he nodded. Very well. We'll test your strength. Not with words, but with action. Outside, the Imperial fleet shifted into position. The vast ships were a reminder of the power the Empire commanded. They moved as one, silent and deadly. Reynolds watched from the shuttle's viewport, the tension in the air palpable. The Imperial fleet had just issued a challenge. The Vanguard was to engage in a simulation, a battle meant to test its strength. If it could survive, it would prove that humanity had the potential to stand alongside the stars. Are you ready, Captain? Riva's voice crackled through the comms. Reynolds took a deep breath. We're ready. Let's show them what we're made of. The simulation began with a burst of energy from the Imperial fleet. The Vanguard was immediately bombarded by waves of energy blasts, a test of its shields and evasive maneuvering. The ship jolted under the first few impacts, but the shields held firm. The crew of the Vanguard worked quickly, each member performing their duties with precision and focus. Shields holding at 90%, Captain, Riva reported. We've managed to avoid most of the fire. Reynolds nodded. Keep it steady. We're not here to win. We're here to prove that we can take it and keep fighting. The battle raged on with the Vanguard dodging and weaving through a barrage of attacks. The ship's speed and agility were its strongest points. It was smaller than the Imperial ships, but it could move faster and respond quicker. Captain, incoming fire from 2 more ships, Riva called out. Reynolds didn't hesitate. Divert all power to the engines. Prepare to make a sharp turn. The Vanguard dodged the incoming, fire spinning away from the attackers in a blur of motion. It was a dance of skill and precision, one that demonstrated the crew's ability to work together under pressure. Shields down to 70%, Captain, Riva reported again. We're taking damage, but we're holding steady. The simulation continued, each wave of attacks testing the Vanguard's defenses, but with each blow the ship showed resilience. It wasn't about winning. It was about proving that humanity could endure no matter what was thrown at them. Finally, the simulation ended. The Imperial fleet pulled back, the battle subsiding, into a tense silence. The Vanguard had held its ground, and Jaster's fleet had seen enough. Back on the Reckoning, Jaster stared at the view screen, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to his officers. They've passed the test. Humanity has proven its strength. He looked back at the view screen where the Vanguard floated, damaged but intact. It's time for the next step. The simulation was over, and the Vanguard had survived. Damaged but not defeated, it had proven that humanity was far stronger than the Empire had expected. The Imperial fleet, while still a formidable force, had not broken the spirit of the human crew. They had endured. They had fought back. And they had shown the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated. Captain Reynolds stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the view screen where the Imperial ships now moved away. The battle was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was more than just a victory. This was a statement. Status report, Lieutenant Riva, Reynolds said, his voice calm but tense. Riva, at her console, quickly glanced at the readouts. Shields are at 60%, Captain. We've taken some damage to the outer hull, but nothing. We can't repair. The crew is tired, but they're in good spirits. We held our ground. Reynolds nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Good. We've proven we're strong enough to take the Empire's test. Now, we need to prove that we're strong enough to stand beside them. Riva gave him a curious look. What do you mean, Captain? We're not here to fight forever. We're here to build something bigger. The Empire has power, but they don't have everything. Humanity brings something different to the table. Hope, Riva said quietly, understanding what he meant. Exactly, Reynolds replied. Hope, resilience, the ability to adapt, that's what the galaxy needs, and Earth can give it. Back on the Reckoning, General Jaster stood in the command room, staring at the view screen where the Vanguard was still visible in the distance. The human ship had passed their test, and now Jaster had to make a decision. The Empire didn't give second chances. But something about this moment felt different. The humans had proven their worth, but what would they do next? Admiral Trek stood by his side, still skeptical. General, we've let them show their strength, but they've only scratched the surface of what we're capable of. Are you sure this is the right move? Jaster turned to face him, his expression firm. The right move, Admiral, is not about defeating them. It's about understanding them. These humans have something we don't, and if we ignore that, we risk underestimating them. But they're just humans, Trex argued, though his voice lacked the usual confidence. They've only been a small planet for so long. What can they really offer? Jaster looked out at the stars, his mind racing. The galaxy is changing. We can either be part of that change or we can resist it. If we resist, we'll be left behind. With a deep sigh, Trex nodded reluctantly. What do we do now? We take the next step, Jaster said, his voice calm but resolute. We offer them a choice. Back on the Vanguard, the crew was gathered on the bridge, waiting for any new orders. Captain Reynolds stood before them, his face serious but hopeful. They've received our message, he said, addressing the crew. Now it's up to us to make our case. We didn't come here to make enemies. We came to show the galaxy that humanity has earned its place. Lieutenant Riva spoke up, her voice filled with determination. And we're not backing down. We've survived every test they've thrown at us. Reynolds nodded. Exactly. The Empire will test us again, and we'll be ready. But we have to remember, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for a future where Earth is not just a small backwater planet, but a force to be reckoned with. The door to the bridge opened, and the communications officer looked up from his console. Captain, we've received a transmission from the Empire. Reynolds walked over to the console, his eyes narrowing. What do they want? The officer's face was tense. It's General Jaster. He wants to speak with you. Reynolds exchanged a look with Riva before nodding. Put him through. A moment later, Jaster's face appeared on the screen. His expression was still hard, but there was a subtle change in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Captain Reynolds, Jaster said, his voice measured but not as cold as it had been before. You've proven your strength, you've earned my respect. Reynolds didn't speak right away. Instead, he watched the general carefully. This was the moment that could change everything. Jaster continued. The Empire has its own goals, its own methods, but I've come to realize that humanity has something we need, and I believe we can learn from each other. So I am offering you a choice. Reynolds leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of choice? Jaster's gaze grew more serious. The Empire will not welcome you with open arms, Captain, but we are willing to work with you. We are willing to offer you a place at the table, to build a new future together, not as enemies but as allies. Reynolds was silent for a moment, processing what he had just heard. This was unexpected, but it was the opportunity they had been waiting for. He had always known that strength alone wasn't enough. What mattered was the willingness to build something more. I accept your offer, General, Reynolds said finally, his voice steady. Humanity will stand beside the stars. Jaster's lips twitched, almost as if he were about to smile. I knew you would. It's time for a new chapter in this galaxy, one where humans are no longer the outsiders. The communication cut off, and Reynolds stood there staring at the screen. His crew gathered around him, their faces a mix of disbelief and excitement. We did it, Riva said, her voice full of awe. We're in. Reynolds turned to face her, a small smile crossing his face. This is just the beginning. The galaxy. We'll see what humanity is capable of. As the Vanguard drifted in the vastness of space, surrounded by the might of the Imperial fleet, Reynolds couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had proven themselves, not just through strength, but through perseverance. Humanity had come to the table, and now it had a place at it. And in the future, when others looked to Earth, they would no longer see a weak, divided world. They would see a species that had earned its place among the stars, a species that would fight for a future no matter the odds. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had just begun to write its story.